When Maya, a quiet new employee with a distinctive accent, joins a bustling marketing firm, she's quickly dismissed and mocked by her colleagues, especially Tom, who sees her as an easy target. But what they don't know is that Maya is secretly the CEO, observing the culture she built. As tensions rise, Maya prepares to reveal her identity, bringing with her the consequences of their actions. What will happen when the truth comes out, and who will be ready to face the fallout? Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more exciting content, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's dive in. The hum of computers, the muted sounds of phones ringing, and the occasional clatter of keyboards filled the office. It was a typical Monday at the marketing firm, where every employee sat at their desk, immersed in their work. The company prided itself on its creativity, boasting a diverse team from various walks of life. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly inclusive environment, subtle prejudices still lingered, hidden in the corners of conversations and in the minds of those who had yet to confront their biases. Tom, a senior employee with over a decade of experience, sat at his desk by the large windows, lazily spinning a pen between his fingers. He had been with the company long enough to see people come and go, and in his mind, he had the place figured out. His confidence had morphed into a sense of entitlement over the years, and he wasn't shy about offering his unsolicited opinions. His coworkers had grown used to it, often dismissing his offhand comments as part of his charm, but charm could quickly sour when it targeted the wrong person. Today, however, there was something different about the atmosphere. A new employee had arrived, and with her came a curiosity that piqued Tom's interest. Maya was her name, and she had been introduced to the team that morning by the HR manager with all the usual formalities. Yet, from the moment Maya spoke, Tom's attention had shifted. Her voice, soft but strong, carried an accent that set her apart from the usual hires. The accent wasn't one he could place immediately, but it was enough to catch his ear. "Have you heard the new girl talk?" Tom leaned over to his colleague, Dave, who sat at the adjacent desk. His voice was low, but there was a noticeable hint of disdain in his tone. "It's like she's straight off the boat or something. I could barely make out what she was saying." Dave gave a non-committal grunt, clearly uncomfortable, but unwilling to challenge Tom. He glanced over at Maya, who was busy unpacking her things at her new desk on the other side of the office. Unlike the rest of them, who had been worn down by months or even years of the company grind, Maya seemed fresh, eager. Her polished appearance, her meticulously organized workspace, everything about her seemed professional, yet somehow Tom had fixated on her accent as a flaw, something that set her apart in a negative way. Maya, however, appeared unbothered. She moved with the ease of someone who had navigated this terrain before, perhaps too many times. She was no stranger to the curious glances or the subtle whispers that followed her in new environments. Her accent, a remnant of her upbringing in a country thousands of miles away, had always been the first thing people noticed, and for some, like Tom, it was the only thing that mattered. She sat down at her desk, her fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard as she familiarized herself with the company's systems. Her focus was razor sharp. She had a job to do, and she intended to do it well. This wasn't just a regular office job for her. It was part of something much bigger. But for now, she had to blend in, to observe, and to learn. Tom, meanwhile, had no intention of letting Maya's presence go unnoticed. "Can you imagine working with someone like that on a client call?" he continued, this time louder, ensuring that more of the nearby colleagues could hear. "I mean, good luck trying to explain marketing strategies when no one can understand what you're saying." A few people chuckled nervously, not because they agreed with him, but because they didn't want to be the ones to call him out. Tom had a way of making his opinions feel like jokes, harmless, casual remarks that were easy to dismiss. But Maya heard every word. She didn't flinch, though. Instead, she maintained her focus on the task at hand, the rhythm of her typing unbroken. But inside, the words stung, and not because she hadn't heard them before. It was because they represented a mindset she had worked so hard to rise above. A mindset she had vowed to change, no matter where she went. The morning went on, and soon it was time for the daily team meeting. The team gathered in the conference room where the atmosphere was a blend of professionalism and casual camaraderie. Tom, as always, took his seat near the front, eager to lead the discussion. Maya, meanwhile, took a seat toward the back, her presence quiet but noticeable. The meeting began with the usual updates, upcoming deadlines, client feedback, new projects on the horizon. But as soon as Maya spoke, Tom's attention once again zeroed in on her accent. "Can you repeat that?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of mockery. "Sorry, it's just hard to follow sometimes." Maya paused for a split second, her heart skipping a beat. She had been clear, concise even, but Tom's comment was a deliberate jab. The room went silent for a moment, and Maya could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with discomfort, but none of them said anything. Without missing a beat, Maya repeated her point, her voice steady. "I was suggesting that we adjust our strategy for the client's campaign to better align with their recent feedback. I believe it would increase engagement by at least 15%. This time, Tom didn't respond. He shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard by Maya's poise. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Tom had expected Maya to falter, to become flustered by his comment. Instead, she had stood her ground, her professionalism unshaken. As the meeting adjourned, Maya returned to her desk, her mind still replaying the exchange. She had faced this kind of treatment before, but it never got easier. Every time someone made a comment about her accent, it reminded her of the uphill battles she had fought to get to where she was today. But this was different. Maya wasn't just another employee here. She was the founder of the company, conducting an undercover assessment of the workplace culture she had worked so hard to build. And Tom, along with the rest of the office, had no idea who she really was. As the days unfolded, Maya maintained a low profile, navigating her new role with quiet determination. She performed her tasks efficiently, submitted reports on time, and attended meetings where her contributions, though valuable, often went unnoticed by some. To most of her colleagues, Maya was just another new hire trying to find her footing, but for Maya herself, this was part of a much larger plan, one that no one else in the office had the faintest clue about. Yet, not everyone overlooked Maya. Tom, in particular, seemed to have made it his personal mission to scrutinize her every move. His attention was laser-focused on Maya, but it wasn't her work performance that intrigued him. It was her accent. Tom's subtle jabs had evolved into a recurring theme. It started with small comments, disguised as jokes, but they were always aimed at her manner of speaking. "Hey, Maya," Tom called out one afternoon as the team gathered in the break room for a coffee break. "Where's that accent of yours from anyway? It's kind of exotic, you know?" Maya, who had been pouring herself a cup of coffee, paused for a moment. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, a strange mixture of curiosity and mockery. She had heard this question many times before, and the answer was always met with varying degrees of interest, sometimes genuine, sometimes condescending. She turned to face Tom, offering a polite smile. "I grew up overseas," she replied simply, keeping her explanation short. There was no need to indulge him with more information than necessary. Her accent was a part of her identity, but it wasn't something she felt obligated to explain. Tom nodded, but there was a mischievous glint in his eye. "Oh yeah? Must have been tough learning the language, huh? You're doing pretty well, though," he added with a grin, as if paying her a backhanded compliment. Maya's grip tightened around her coffee cup, but she forced herself to remain composed. She had been in this position before. Too many times to count. It wasn't that the words themselves were particularly cruel, but it was the underlying tone that bothered her. The way Tom spoke to her made it clear that, in his mind, her accent set her apart in a way that was inferior, not just different. And worse, he seemed to relish the attention he garnered from making her the center of his jokes. The others in the break room remained quiet. A few exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to laugh or remain silent. Most chose the latter, not wanting to get involved. Sarah, a coworker who had been friendly toward Maya from the start, stood nearby, her face showing clear discomfort. But even she said nothing. Maya's response was measured, her voice steady. "I've been speaking the language for a long time now. It's never been an issue." Tom chuckled lightly, clearly not taking the hint. "Well, that's good. Just saying, Sometimes it can be a little hard to follow you, but hey, you'll get there." Maya said nothing more, choosing instead to finish her coffee and head back to her desk. She had learned long ago that engaging with people like Tom rarely led to any meaningful resolution. They didn't want to have a conversation about inclusion or respect. They wanted to maintain their position of power by making others feel small. But Tom's words lingered in her mind as she worked. Each comment, no matter how small, chipped away at the sense of belonging she had fought so hard to build. It wasn't just about her accent. It was about what it represented. Her voice, her heritage, her journey, they were all intertwined with the sound of her words. And Tom's constant reminders that she didn't quite fit in were beginning to wear on her. Later that day, Maya found herself staring out the window of the break room, her thoughts drifting to memories of her past. She had grown up in a small village far from here, where everyone spoke the same language, shared the same traditions, and celebrated their cultural roots. Moving abroad for university had been a challenge, not just academically but socially. For years, she had struggled with the feeling of being different, of standing out in ways that made others uncomfortable. Her accent, once a point of pride, had become something she tried to hide. She had spent years trying to soften it, to mold it into something that sounded more acceptable to the people around her. But no matter how hard she tried, it always slipped through. A reminder of where she came from, a reminder that she was not like everyone else. But Maya wasn't the same person she had been back then. She had come to terms with her identity, embraced it even, and she had vowed never to let anyone make her feel inferior because of it again. Still, Tom's remarks stirred up old feelings of insecurity, and she hated that they had the power to affect her in this way. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Sarah approaching, a look of concern on her face. "Hey," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with genuine empathy. "I just wanted to check on you. I heard what Tom said earlier. It wasn't okay." Maya appreciated the gesture, but there was a part of her that wished Sarah had said something in the moment. The silence of the others had been as painful as Tom's words. "Thanks." Maya replied with a small smile. "I'm fine, though. I'm used to it." Sarah frowned, clearly not satisfied with that answer. "You shouldn't have to be used to it. What he's doing, it's not right." Maya sighed, leaning against the counter. "I know, but if I make a big deal out of it, it'll just get worse. People like Tom, they don't change because someone calls them out. They dig in deeper." Sarah bit her lip, clearly torn between wanting to help and feeling powerless to do so. "Well, if you ever need to talk, or if it gets too much, you can always come to me." Maya nodded, grateful for Sarah's support, even if it felt like a small consolation in the face of everything. "I appreciate that." The conversation ended there, but it left Maya feeling conflicted. She knew Sarah meant well, but kind words didn't change the culture of a workplace. And right now, the culture in this office was allowing people like Tom to thrive unchecked. Maya could see it clearly, the way people laughed at his jokes or remained silent in the face of his remarks. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the entire environment that had been cultivated here, an environment where people like Maya were seen as other, simply because of the way they spoke or where they came from. Later that evening, as Maya sat at her small kitchen table, her mind wandered to the reason she was here in the first place. She hadn't taken this job to simply work her way up in the company. She had taken it to assess the culture, to see if the values she had tried to instill in the company's mission statement were truly being upheld. But what she had found so far was disappointing. The company she had founded years ago had grown, expanded beyond her wildest dreams. But with that growth had come a detachment from the core values she had built it upon: respect, inclusion, and empathy. And now, as the founder and CEO of this company, albeit undercover for the time being, Maya had a decision to make. How far would she let this go? How much longer would she observe without intervening? The next morning, Maya arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Tom's behavior, while frustrating, was only a symptom of a larger issue. She knew she had to keep a low profile for now, but soon enough, the time would come to reveal who she truly was. And when that time came, Tom and the rest of the office would be forced to reckon with the consequences of their actions. Maya wasn't here just to fit in. She was here to change things, to hold up a mirror to the people around her and show them the impact of their words and actions. And while Tom might see her as just another new hire with a funny accent, he would soon learn that she was much more than that. This silent struggle wouldn't last forever. By the time the office clock struck noon on the following Wednesday, tension had become a constant undercurrent in Maya's workday. The quiet taunts, the sideways glances, and the frequent dismissals of her ideas had slowly chipped away at the professional veneer of the team. Most of the interactions were subtle, cloaked in jokes or casual remarks, but the sting was always there, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. Tom's comments had become a daily occurrence, always framed as humor, but clearly dripping with condescension. Whether it was in team meetings, during client calls, or in casual office conversations, he never missed an opportunity to make a joke about her accent or question her ability to contribute meaningfully. It wasn't long before his behavior escalated. That morning, the team gathered for their weekly meeting in the conference room. It was an important session, as the team was discussing strategies for a major client, one that the company was desperate to impress. Maya had worked tirelessly on her presentation, meticulously preparing every detail. She knew her strategy was solid, backed by research and designed to achieve the results the client wanted. As the meeting began, Tom, as usual, took the lead. He spoke with the easy confidence of someone who had been at the company for years and assumed his opinions were the most valuable in the room. Maya waited patiently for her turn to speak, her notes organized in front of her. But the moment she started her presentation, Tom interrupted. "Hold on a second," he said, raising a hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Before we dive into Maya's plan, can we make sure everyone's clear on the basic approach? Just to avoid any confusion down the line." Maya froze for a brief moment, her words caught in her throat. The implication was clear. Tom didn't trust her to communicate her ideas effectively. He was casting doubt on her before she had even begun. "Of course," Maya replied, keeping her tone neutral despite the rising frustration she felt. She knew better than to react emotionally. Instead, she calmly explained the groundwork for her strategy, outlining the client's needs and the market data that supported her approach. But Tom wasn't done. Yeah, he interrupted again, leaning back in his chair. "That's all well and good, but sorry, I'm just having a bit of trouble following. Could you maybe slow down a bit? Or better yet, maybe someone else could explain." The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward Maya. Some of her colleagues looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Others watched her, waiting to see how she would respond. The tension was thick, and Maya could feel the heat rising in her chest. She had been clear, concise, and professional in her explanation, and yet Tom had reduced her contribution to something unintelligible, simply because of the way she spoke. Maya took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. She had dealt with people like Tom before, and each time it felt like a battle she shouldn't have to fight. But this time it was different. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the values she had built her company on, the values that were supposed to guide this very team. "I believe I've been clear," Maya said, her voice firm but controlled. "If there's any confusion, I'm happy to clarify." Tom raised his eyebrows, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, I'm sure it's clear to some people. I just think it might be easier if someone with a bit more, experience handled this one." The insult hung in the air, blatant and unfiltered. For a moment, Maya considered responding directly, but she held herself back. She had learned long ago that people like Tom thrived on conflict. They wanted a reaction, and she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. Instead, she continued with her presentation, ignoring Tom's interruptions. She outlined her strategy in detail, providing data and analysis to back up every point. By the time she finished, the room was silent once more, and Maya could see the subtle nods of approval from some of her colleagues. They knew her plan was solid. Tom, however, remained unimpressed. "Well, that was thorough," Tom said, his tone dripping with false praise. "But I think we might need to rework some parts, just to make sure the client understands what we're saying, I'll take another look at it later." Maya clenched her jaw, biting back the frustration that threatened to spill over. She had put in hours of work, crafting a strategy that was not only effective, but innovative. Yet here was Tom, dismissing it with a few casual remarks, as though her efforts were meaningless. And the worst part? No one was speaking up. The meeting ended soon after, and Maya returned to her desk, her hands shaking with the effort of keeping her emotions in check. She had never been one to let her feelings get the better of her in a professional setting, but this was different. This wasn't just a critique of her work. It was an attack on her very identity. As the day wore on, word of the meeting spread throughout the office. It didn't take long for the other employees to hear about what had happened. Some quietly expressed their sympathy to Maya, offering supportive words or awkward smiles. Others remained indifferent, unwilling to get involved. Later that afternoon, Maya found herself in a conversation with Sarah, who had become her closest ally in the office. Sarah had been present in the meeting, and her face had betrayed the discomfort she felt as Tom spoke. "I don't understand why no one said anything," Sarah said, her voice tinged with frustration. "He was so out of line." Maya sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Because that's the culture here, apparently. People see things like this happening, but they don't want to get involved. It's easier to just stay silent." Sarah shook her head, her expression troubled. "But this isn't right, Maya. You shouldn't have to put up with this." Maya offered a faint smile. "I know, but this isn't just about me. It's about something bigger." Sarah looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" Maya hesitated for a moment. She had been keeping her true identity a secret for so long, but the time was drawing near when she would have to reveal who she really was. For now, though, she needed to stay quiet. There was still more to observe, more to uncover about the company's culture. "You'll see," Maya said quietly. "Soon enough, things will change." The next day, an email was sent out announcing that the CEO of the company would be visiting the office for an evaluation of the team. The news spread quickly, and the office was abuzz with nervous excitement. Tom, always eager to impress the higher-ups, immediately began preparing for the visit. He was confident that his years of experience and his self-proclaimed leadership abilities would shine through during the evaluation. Maya, on the other hand, knew exactly what was coming. The CEO wasn't just coming for a routine check-in. This visit had been planned from the beginning, as part of Maya's undercover assessment of the workplace culture. By the time the day of the visit arrived, the office was in a frenzy. Tom was dressed in his best suit, his usual smugness amplified by the prospect of impressing the CEO. He spent the morning going over his notes, preparing for what he assumed would be a showcase of his leadership. When the CEO finally arrived, the entire office gathered in the main conference room for a company-wide meeting. The CEO, a well-respected figure known for her no-nonsense approach, greeted the employees with a warm but professional demeanor. Tom, eager to make a good impression, was the first to speak up. "Welcome to our office," Tom said with a confident smile. "We've been working hard, and I'm sure you'll be impressed with what we've accomplished." The CEO nodded politely, her gaze sweeping over the room. She made her way around the office, stopping to speak with various employees, asking about their roles and responsibilities. When she reached Maya's desk, Tom was quick to interject. "This is Maya," he said, gesturing toward her. "She's one of our newer employees. Still getting the hang of things, but she's doing all right." Maya could feel the familiar tension rising in her chest, but she said nothing. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when everything would come to light. The CEO turned to Tom, her expression unreadable. "Is that so?" Tom nodded, clearly proud of himself. "Yeah, just a bit of a language barrier sometimes. But we're all working together to make sure everything's clear." The room went silent. Maya stood up, meeting the CEO's gaze. "There's something I need to say," Maya began, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not just a new employee. I'm the founder and CEO of this company." The shock that rippled through the room was almost palpable. Tom's confident smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process what he had just heard. "I came here undercover to evaluate the culture of the workplace," Maya continued, "and what I've seen has been an eye-opening." Tom stared at her, speechless. The The rest of the office was equally stunned, the weight of Maya's revelation settling over them like a heavy cloud. The consequences of their behavior, Tom's behavior, were about to become all too real. The room remained silent, the gravity of Maya's revelation sinking in. For a moment it seemed as though the very air had thickened, the weight of disbelief pressing down on everyone present. Tom, whose face had turned a shade paler, stood frozen at the head of the table, his earlier smugness completely evaporated. The shock on his face was evident as he tried to process the words Maya had just spoken. "Maya, you're the CEO?" he finally stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, as though he hoped that by questioning it, the truth might somehow be different. Maya nodded, her expression composed, but there was no mistaking the firmness in her eyes. "Yes, I am. I founded this company several years ago, and I've been working undercover for the past few months to assess the culture and integrity of this office." The murmurs began immediately, rippling through the assembled employees like a wave. Some exchanged nervous glances, while others appeared completely dumbstruck, struggling to reconcile the new information with the image they had formed of Maya during her time as a new hire. To them, she had been just another colleague, someone learning the ropes like the rest of them. And yet, all along, she had been watching, observing their actions, and silently taking notes on their behavior. Tom's eyes darted around the room, seeking validation from the other employees, but no one met his gaze. The usual crowd that might have laughed along with his jokes or offered him support now looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact. It was clear that the dynamic had shifted, and Tom was no longer in control of the narrative. "You've been undercover?" Tom asked again, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. His voice had lost its usual confidence, replaced by uncertainty and a growing sense of dread. "Yes," Maya said, her voice steady. "I wanted to see firsthand how our employees treat each other, especially those who might not fit into a conventional mold. What I've experienced here has been eye-opening, both in terms of the strengths of this team and the areas where we need serious improvement." Tom swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. "Maya, I didn't know." Maya's eyes didn't waver. "No, you didn't. And that's exactly the point. You didn't know who I was, and yet you felt it was acceptable to treat me and others disrespectfully because of something as superficial as my accent." Tom opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, he stood there, visibly deflated, the full weight of his actions beginning to sink in. It wasn't just Maya's title that had changed everything. It was the realization that he had been called out for his behavior in front of everyone, and there was no escaping the consequences. The CEO, who had been standing nearby during the exchange, stepped forward. Her presence was authoritative, and when she spoke, the room fell into a respectful silence. "This is exactly why we value integrity and respect in this company," the CEO said, her voice calm but resolute. "We are a diverse team, with employees from all backgrounds, and that diversity is one of our greatest strengths. But it only works if every member of the team treats each other with the respect they deserve, regardless of where they come from or how they speak." Maya nodded in agreement. "That's right. We built this company on values of inclusion and empathy, and while many of you embody those values, there are still areas where we need to grow. What I've witnessed here over the past few months has been both encouraging and disheartening." Her gaze swept the room, taking in the faces of her colleagues, some of whom now looked guilty, others who looked relieved. "There are those among you who have been supportive, who have shown kindness and respect to your coworkers, and I want to acknowledge that, but there have also been moments of discrimination, moments where jokes and casual remarks have crossed the line." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the spotlight of Maya's words clearly focused on him. He had always considered himself to be one of the good guys in the office, popular, funny, easygoing. But now, faced with the reality of his actions, he realized just how wrong he had been. Maya continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had experienced this kind of treatment many times before. "It's easy to dismiss comments as jokes, or to assume that because no one is speaking up, it's not a big deal. But I assure you, it is a big deal. The things we say, the way we treat people, it matters, It affects the culture of the workplace and the well-being of every employee. The tension in the room was palpable, and as Maya spoke, the truth of her words hung heavy over the group. Tom, who had once thrived on the approval of his colleagues, now felt isolated, as if the ground had shifted beneath him. For the first time, he understood the gravity of what he had done. The jokes, the mocking, things he had always assumed were harmless, had actually caused harm, not just to Maya, but to the entire team dynamic. "I didn't mean for it to come across like that," Tom said suddenly, his voice small, almost pleading. "It was just a joke, Maya. I didn't realize." Maya met his eyes, and for a moment her expression softened, but only slightly. "I understand that you didn't realize the impact of your words, Tom, but that's the problem. Too often, people don't realize the harm they're causing until it's too late. And I hope that this moment helps you reflect on that." Tom nodded slowly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to make you feel like that." Maya nodded in acknowledgement, but her tone remained firm. "I appreciate your apology, Tom, but this isn't just about me. It's about the way we all interact with each other in this company. Going forward, we need to be more mindful of how we treat people, especially those who may be different from us." The CEO stepped forward again, addressing the room. "We will be implementing new training programs focused on diversity, inclusion, and respect in the workplace. I expect everyone to participate and to take these lessons to heart. This is not optional." There were nods of agreement around the room, though the atmosphere remained thick with tension. It was clear that the leadership team wasn't going to allow this behavior to continue unchecked. Maya turned her attention back to the group. "This company has the potential to be something truly great, but that can only happen if we all contribute to a positive, respectful environment. I believe in second chances, and I believe that people can grow and change, but it's up to each of you to take responsibility for your actions and make an effort to do better." The message was clear. Maya had made her point, and the entire office understood that things were going to change. The casual culture that had allowed prejudice to slip through the cracks was no longer acceptable, and everyone, especially Tom, would need to adjust. In the days following Maya's revelation, the office atmosphere shifted dramatically. Tom, once the office's self-proclaimed comedian, became more reserved, his usual quips and comments noticeably absent. He spent most of his time quietly at his desk, keeping his head down and avoiding unnecessary conversations. It was clear that the events of the meeting had shaken him, forcing him to confront the reality of his behavior in a way he had never done before. Sarah, who had been a quiet supporter of Maya throughout her time in the office, approached her during a break one afternoon. "I'm really glad you spoke up," Sarah said, her voice warm and sincere. "I think a lot of people needed to hear that, including me." Maya smiled, her usual calm demeanor softened by the relief of no longer having to hide her identity. "Thank you, Sarah. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. This company has the potential to be so much more, and it starts with how we treat each other." Sarah nodded. "I've always respected you, but now I think you've earned a lot more than respect. You've earned admiration." Maya chuckled softly. "I didn't do it for admiration. I did it because I believe in what we're building here, and I believe that this team can be better if we're willing to put in the effort." As the days turned into weeks, the office began to settle into a new rhythm. The diversity training sessions were scheduled, and employees participated actively, engaging in discussions about respect, empathy, and inclusion. It wasn't a quick fix. Changing a workplace culture took time, but it was a start. For Tom, the adjustment was more difficult. He had always prided himself on his ability to connect with people, to be the life of the office. But now, he realized that much of what he had considered harmless fun had actually alienated others, and that realization weighed heavily on him. He spent long hours reflecting on his actions, replaying the moments when he had made Maya or anyone else feel less than. One afternoon, after one of the diversity training sessions, Tom found himself walking past Maya's desk. He paused for a moment, hesitant, before finally gathering the courage to approach her. "Maya," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for everything, for calling me out when I needed it, and for giving me a chance to make things right." Maya looked up from her work, her expression thoughtful. "It's not easy to admit when we're wrong, Tom, but what matters is what you do moving forward." Tom nodded, his gaze serious. "I'm going to do better, I promise." Maya smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I believe you." The truth had unfolded, and with it came change, not just for Maya, but for the entire company. The experience had been challenging, but in the end, it had paved the way for growth, understanding, and a renewed commitment to the values that had built the company in the first place. But more than that, it had reminded everyone that respect wasn't just about words. It was about actions, about how we treat one another in the small, everyday moments. And Maya's story wasn't just about an accent or a job title. It was about the power of empathy and the courage to stand up for what was right. And with that, the office moved forward, one step at a time, toward a more inclusive and respectful future. The revelation of Maya's true identity as the founder and CEO sent shockwaves through the office. In the days that followed, the atmosphere was one of quiet reflection. The once buzzing corridors of the marketing firm now felt more subdued, as though the weight of Maya's words had left an imprint on every employee. For Maya, the days following the reveal were a delicate balancing act. She remained calm and professional, but she knew her presence now carried a different weight. The respect she had commanded as a quiet observer had shifted. She was no longer the new employee. She was the leader, the one who had shaped this company's vision. But with that came the added responsibility of steering her team through this turbulent time, helping them reckon with the consequences of their actions and the changes they needed to make. The diversity training programs were in full swing, and the discussions during these sessions were intense. For many, they were eye-opening, forcing employees to confront their own unconscious biases. For some, these sessions were uncomfortable, as they were faced with the reality that the culture of the office, one that many had passively accepted, was deeply flawed. Tom, in particular, found the sessions difficult. He had always considered himself open-minded, someone who treated everyone equally, but now he was being forced to acknowledge the harm his words had caused. Each training session peeled back another layer of his defensiveness, exposing the truth that he had been unwilling to see. The jokes, the comments, the dismissals, what he had considered harmless teasing was, in fact, a reflection of the prejudice he had internalized. He spent long nights after work, replaying the events of the past few months in his mind. Every conversation he had with Maya, every time he had made a comment about her accent, every time he had laughed at her expense, it all came rushing back, and it wasn't easy to face. Tom had always believed he was the funny guy, the one who lightened the mood in the office. But now he realized that his jokes had been at someone else's expense, and that someone had been the person responsible for the very job he took for granted. As he walked into work one morning, Tom couldn't help but notice how different things felt. The usual camaraderie he shared with his colleagues had dimmed. People still spoke to him, but there was a distance now, a subtle shift in how they interacted. He could sense their discomfort, their judgment, and it stung. He had once been the popular one, the person everyone wanted to chat with during lunch breaks, but now things had changed. It wasn't just the judgment of others that weighed on him, though. It was his own self-reflection. The more he thought about it, the more he realized just how much his words had hurt Maya, and likely others as well. What he had dismissed as just joking around had carried deeper implications, ones that went beyond simple office banter. He had disrespected not just a colleague but his own boss, and in doing so, he had violated the very values the company claimed to uphold. The day came when Tom was called into a meeting with HR and Maya. He had known it was coming. The email request for the meeting had appeared in his inbox the night before, but that didn't make it any easier. As he sat in the small conference room, waiting for Maya and the HR representative to arrive, his heart raced. He had never been in a situation like this before, where his job might be on the line. And worse, his pride had taken a hit he hadn't expected. He had always thought of himself as untouchable in the company, but now everything was uncertain. The door opened, and Maya entered, followed by Sarah from HR. Maya's demeanor was calm, but there was an air of finality about her. She took her seat across from Tom, her eyes meeting his. Tom immediately felt the weight of her gaze. It wasn't angry or vengeful, but it was firm, and it conveyed the seriousness of the situation. "Thank you for coming, Tom," Maya said, her voice steady. "I know this isn't an easy conversation, but it's one we need to have." Tom nodded, unable to find the right words. His throat felt tight, and for once, the man who always had something to say was speechless. "I want to start by saying that I appreciate the apology you gave me after the meeting the other day," Maya continued. "I know that what happened wasn't intentional on your part, but it was still harmful. And part of being in a professional environment, part of being human, really, is taking responsibility for the harm we cause, even if we didn't mean to." Tom swallowed, his voice finally finding its way to the surface. "I'm really sorry, Maya. I didn't realize what I was doing. It was never meant to hurt anyone." Maya nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I believe you, Tom, but this isn't just about intent, it's about impact. Your words and actions had an impact, not just on me but on the entire team. The culture we create in this office is shaped by how we treat one another, and when people make assumptions or jokes based on things like accents or backgrounds, it undermines that culture." Tom nodded again, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I understand that now," he said quietly, "and I want to do better. I don't want to be that person anymore." Sarah from HR spoke up then, her voice professional but empathetic. "Tom, we've all seen that you have the potential to contribute positively to this team, but we need to ensure that going forward, you're fully committed to the company's values of respect and inclusion. That means not just avoiding discriminatory behavior, but actively working to support a more inclusive culture." "I will," Tom said quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose this job. I want to make things right." Maya considered him for a moment before responding. "I'm not interested in punishing you, Tom. I'm interested in helping you grow. We all make mistakes, but what matters is how we learn from them. That's why I'm giving you a second chance." Tom's heart lifted slightly at her words, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. The path to redemption would require him to reflect deeply on his actions and commit to real change, not just superficial gestures. He had to prove not only to Maya and his colleagues, but to himself that he was capable of being better. "There will be conditions, of course," Sarah added. "You'll be required to undergo additional training, and we'll be monitoring your interactions closely moving forward. This is an opportunity for you to rebuild trust, but it's going to take time and effort." Tom nodded earnestly. "I understand, and I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes." Maya offered him a small, encouraging smile. "I believe you, Tom, and I hope that this experience helps you grow, not just as an employee, but as a person. We all have the capacity for change if we're willing to confront our flaws honestly." The meeting ended with a sense of resolution, but Tom knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. As he walked out of the conference room, he felt a mixture of relief and determination. The relief came from knowing that he had been given a second chance, but the determination came from knowing that he had a lot of work to do to earn back the respect he had lost. In the weeks that followed, Tom threw himself into the diversity training programs with a seriousness that surprised even him. He listened carefully, engaged in discussions, and began to reflect deeply on his past behavior. Slowly but surely, he started to rebuild his relationships with his colleagues, particularly with those he had unintentionally alienated through his actions. Meanwhile, Maya continued to lead the company with the same grace and determination she had always shown. Her decision to give Tom a second chance had been a calculated one, based on her belief in the power of redemption and the possibility of personal growth. She had seen people change before, and she believed Tom had the capacity to do the same. The culture of the office also began to shift, slowly but noticeably. The diversity training programs fostered a greater sense of empathy and awareness among the employees, and the once casual acceptance of microaggressions and dismissive behavior was no longer tolerated. People became more mindful of their words and actions, and Maya's leadership helped set the tone for a more inclusive and respectful environment. One afternoon, a few months after the initial reveal, Tom approached Maya's office. He knocked softly on the door, and when she invited him in, he stepped inside, his posture more humble than it had ever been. "Maya, I just wanted to thank you again," he said, his voice sincere, "for giving me a second chance. I've learned a lot, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to grow." Maya smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, Tom. I've seen the effort you've been putting in, and it hasn't gone unnoticed. Growth isn't easy, but it's always worth it." Tom nodded, feeling a sense of pride that came not from his usual bravado, but from the genuine progress he had made. "I still have a long way to go, but I'm committed to making things better, not just for myself, but for the team." Maya's smile widened. "That's all I can ask for." As the months passed, the changes in the company became more ingrained. The workplace had transformed from one where subtle prejudices went unchecked to one where respect, inclusion, and empathy were the guiding principles. And while the journey hadn't been easy for anyone, especially for Tom, it was clear that the lessons learned had a lasting impact on everyone involved. For Maya, the experience had reaffirmed her belief in the importance of leading with empathy and accountability. She had built the company with those values in mind, and now, more than ever, she was committed to ensuring that they were upheld. In the end, it wasn't just about the consequences of discrimination, it was about the power of redemption, the strength of humility, and the importance of taking responsibility for our actions. The lessons learned weren't just for Tom or Maya, they were for everyone. And in that, the company found its way forward, stronger and more united than ever before. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.